one of the questions I have, and I, it scares me to even ask it because it almost feels like, I don't know, it's scary. But, I thought since we are having this honest and open-hearted conversation, one of the things for me, my personal and direct experience has been, here's the American dream. You work hard, opportunities will open for you, and you'll get wealth, you'll get experiences. And so my parents immigrated to the United States. My dad worked hard, moved up at his work. My mom got her education, got a master's. They put 3 kids in school. We took trips going skiing, doing all kinds of, cool stuff. And so it's like, hey, here's the American dream, go get it. And everyone that I know in my circle of, the Jewish community and others in the San Fernando Valley, everyone got what they worked hard, they got, and so one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, isn't that the case? And is that not the case? Or is that not your experience? I mean, and what is it that I don't know that I should be aware of? Because my assumption is this is for everybody. So I don't know.
Thank you for that question. That's a great question. A lot of people look at the African-American experience. We've been in Northern America since 1619, and it's an obvious question. You say, if your people have been here since 1619, how come they're in 2020 still struggling, still in housing projects, still in low-income areas, when my family came maybe in the 30s or maybe in the 20s or maybe something like that. And now we own all these businesses and we've worked really hard to get it. So therefore, it's assumed that the person on the other end who doesn't have it is not working hard. And that's the assumption. And I appreciate your question because it's a hard question to ask. A lot of people, they'll think it and it'll affect their relationship with people of color, especially Black people, but they don't voice it. So I appreciate your strength in asking the question. But I would like to answer the question, like to go back to the end of the Civil War. The end of the Civil War in, let's say, 1865, there were a lot of Black people who entered politics. We had Black senators, we had Black mayors, we had Black people in government, a lot of high officials in politics right after the Civil War. This is not people who don't work hard. Right after the Civil War, we had tons of people doing a lot of great things. But when Reconstruction era came in, they were disenfranchised out of these areas of influence, areas of politics, by denying the African American the vote, which he was granted during the 16th Amendment. So now no one Black can vote for these Black people to stay in power, and they all got voted out. So now we have been disenfranchised from political power, and this is a resource that people need. Freshly after that, we're talking about the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, when this took place. Black people said, okay, without that, we're just going to isolate ourselves and just do well on our own, right? Because a lot of my immigrant brothers and sisters, they make this statement as if they say, wow, let me educate Black people on how to get ahead. So I remind them that in 1921, there was a town called, the nickname for it was Black Wall Street, but it was Rosewood in Tulsa. It was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So Black Wall Street was in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. This was a very wealthy Black community, extremely wealthy. And as you can see by the flyer here, there were over 600 businesses, 21 churches, 21 restaurants, 30 grocery stores. These are all Black owned. A movie theater, 6 private planes. This is how wealthy this Black community was in 1921. They had a hospital, a bank, a post office. So when people say Black people must not work hard, because I worked hard and I achieved, so I don't understand why they can't make it. We have done that. And what was our reward for doing so well in the American system? What was our reward for that is that there was animosity built in a local white neighborhoods, and they found an excuse to start riots against Black people. An excuse always been, especially at that time, is that some Black man tried to steal the flower of a white woman. So the white woman was used as a tool against the black community. And as you can see on that in this particular case, they used a white woman, and they used that to attack this city and destroy black families. They killed so many people, lynched so many people. They burned down buildings. They took children and they killed them. They shot into people's homes. People were afraid for their lives. The first time an American city was bombed from the air was Tulsa, Oklahoma, by white supremacists bombing a black town, the first time in our history. So as you can see on our second slide, that it is an actual disaster. You can see this is an actual live picture from Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. And you can read the caption there. It's an archival photo of smoke over Tulsa, Oklahoma, the skyline during 1921 riot. And the source is from the Library of Congress. It's not something some black guy drew up and made this. This photo is from the Library of Congress. This place was destroyed. And the wealth, the reason why they called it Black Wall Street is that the wealth of that place, if it existed today, it would be a Beverly Hills. It would be a Manhattan. And we would think, okay, that's a shining jewel of black progress, of black hard work, black dedication, of black self-reliance. But then we were rewarded with riot, murder, and lynching. And this is not the only time. There was another time in Rosewood, Florida. And I don't have a picture of that one. In Rosewood, Florida, it was another affluent black community that was coming up. This is 1923, 2 years later, in a totally separate area. And it was burned down and destroyed. And what was the reason? Black man, some white flower. Both of them were lies. They were lies just to start this riot. People were murdered, people were lynched and destroyed this black affluent town in Rosewood, Florida. And people had to hide in the swamps, in the woods for days until they could get out with their families. They had to keep their kids from crying. They were hungry. They were searching around just to try to survive in these woods. Now, this is simply, I don't want to go too far with it, but this is simply Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Rosewood, Florida. How about the other towns that we have no records? That many, and we do have many more records, right? But I'm not going to talk about the rest of them. But on top of the records we have, what about the towns that we don't hear about? So we worked hard, and we were rewarded with hate and violence. No one wanted to see, if they weren't doing as well, someone black achieving the American dream when they are white and they haven't achieved it yet. So this animosity was built into them because of white supremacy. White supremacy does not belong in the human vocabulary. Neither does black supremacy. Neither does Asian supremacy, yellow, no supremacy in the human. So when this idea crept into the minds of the white man and white woman, they developed a resentment for seeing successful non-white peoples. So when we come up to this point, through the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, in my particular neighborhood that I grew up with was very low income. It seemed like it would be by design. And we thought in our community that it was by design. Other people outside of the community thought we were just lazy. But if you look up a process called redlining in America, it started in 1935. And there's a book out called The Color of Law. There's a book out. In 1935, the Federal Housing Authority, not just some white supremacist secret group, not some KKK organization, the Federal Housing Authority decided to segregate communities of color into desirable, undesirable communities. And what they did is they drew red lines around people of color community, and they made it harder for people to get loans for homes. And they made it higher. If you did get a loan, you had to pay a higher interest rate. And if you're opening a business or have a business in these areas, you have to pay a higher insurance rate. So the flight of businesses moved out of the Black community, jobs moved out of the Black community, the taxes that in revenue from those businesses and those homes also left the Black community. So leaving it with no taxes to repair streets, repair roads, to make plants and parks and waterways. All this is by the design. And you can see from this book, it's a good book on the subject, not the only book, The Color of Law, A Forgotten History on How the Government Segregated America. Now, in this federal housing authority, they promulgated this redlining to separate these houses and basically defund the housing. When you defund an area, at that time particularly, the taxes go into your police force. A smaller police force meant crime could enter your community unopposed. There's not enough police. If your buildings are burning down, there's not enough fire. There's not enough emergency services. You can die from a simple survivable condition, but if you don't have someone come to treat you because there's not enough services, this is what happened to that community, and it's a remnant of that type of community. And it went on for so long. 1969, finally, from 1935 to 1969, the Fair Housing Act was created. Fair Housing Act was something that tried to undo the Federal Housing Department when they did that. So the Federal Housing Act was created. And then 1975, the home mortgage disclosure, to make sure that people are not using that same tactic to make sure that they give preferential treatment to mortgage, so some transparency. So it was by design that there were dilapidated homes, not enough services, broken down roads, telephone poles, no grass. The grass is never greener on that side because of the flight of businesses, the flight of opportunities. People had to travel far to get a good job. And if you didn't have a car and the public transportation didn't go there, you're limited to smaller jobs. So now you have to go to McDonald's because you can get to McDonald's. And I'm not saying anything bad about our service workers or our people who clean the hotels. We need all of them, and they're beautiful workers and they're dedicated workers. But those are the type of jobs that Black people had access to because of this process, which was by design. So when you look at it, 1975, historically speaking, was yesterday, 1975. So we're still trying to climb out of that generational historic oppression of our communities. So that's how our communities got that way, that process, and many others.